Three, two, one, and we're live. Joined today by Mathieu Roche of ID5.
Good morning, Miles.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
How was your Mexico trip?
Crazy. I think we counted 37 meetings in 2 days.
37 meetings in 2 days.
That's a lot. It wasn't just me. It was three of us, but still, it was very intense. For us, everybody's there, right? All of our clients. We're talking to adtech, so that's the place to be.
It's very, very convenient.
Yes. Only one place.
I did, I think, 16 meetings, and I thought that I was doing well. So
yeah. It's 30 minutes back to back, 9 to 6, basically.
Yeah,
and not counting the extra hours, let's say, in the Excelsior bar or those kind of places.
Yeah. Where do you kind of rank Mexico in terms of the other conferences? I don't know if you've managed to get into
we do a few during the year. Mexico is just it's the most business driven in terms of what you get out of those 30 minutes meetings. A lot of people actually that are based in London or that we could meet easily in like Paris or Amsterdam actually schedule meetings in the Mexico because they're just in this mood. We also have a chance to see a lot of product people coming from the US, from companies like Seismic or Iota, things like that. So it's just like this 48 hours of super intense connections with everyone we have to talk to, really. It's different. I mean, Cannes is on another level in terms of the relationship, but the business discussions are not as intense. There's plenty of other conferences that we go to, but like the exhibition format, having like your booth and the ability to kind of go meetings after meetings just in the same place, very, very efficient.
So for our listeners, can you talk a little bit about ID5? How did you think up ID5? What was the motivation? What was the challenge that you were looking to solve within the ecosystem? You're just over a year into running the company, so maybe you can talk everybody through the journey that you've been on.
So I've been in industry for almost 18 years now. I remember DoubleClick before it was Google, which says a lot probably to some of your listeners. Over time, I kind of grew increasingly frustrated at the difficulty to execute as the programmatic ecosystem gets bigger and more innovative, but also more complicated. The connectivity between platforms is a major struggle, is a major hurdle. And on the other side, you've got the walled gardens, you've got Google, Facebook, Amazon now, who have the ability to execute much better because they control the value chain A to Z. And so specifically around the issue of cookie matching and the issue of coming from a data background, right? Having a segment of audience, a segment of users, and being able to activate that segment and only find 30, 40, 50% of the users on the other side is a major frustration for me, for our company, for our clients at the time. So just looked at what was doable, kept coming back to this idea of centralizing and making the ecosystem kind of rely on an infrastructure rather than having each individual platform try to build matching capabilities with each other by itself. And just found the right person to work on this with me and decided to. 41 years old. It was now or never. So I gave it a shot.
So the idea is that it's a centralized, agnostic ID matching. Part.
It's so cookie matching is something that everyone has to do in the industry to be able to share information, whether it's a bid request from an audience segment, with the counterpart. Right? So everyone has match tables, which is a very inefficient way of doing things because you have to. The information is duplicated everywhere, and it's very difficult to build that at scale because you need a lot of contact with a lot of users to have matching opportunities with all of the platforms you work with. So the idea was really to rationalize that by building a centralized cookie matching service that would, instead of having to match N platform to N other platform, just match N platform to us, so N to 1 instead of N to N. So dramatically reducing the footprint of cookie matching, and by reducing the footprint, improving the performance and the efficiencies in the metrics.
And what kind of businesses have you been working on to date?
So in terms of clients, well, any ad tech vendor involved in programmatic is potentially a client because they have to either build or outsource that cookie matching. But if they built it, then they can work with us as a complement. So we've been working with data providers, with sell-side platform, DMPs, buy-side platform, DSPs, really everyone involved in the value chain is interested in improving match rates. And so we've had hundreds of discussions in the past 12 months.
It seems to have been something that has grown, at least in its perceived importance, over the past 24 or 36 months. And we've seen a lot of businesses focusing on ID management, ID resolution, and unification of identity, either across their own ecosystem. So very recently, a few months ago, Adobe released the Experience Cloud ID. Just this week, Salesforce came out and said that they were going to have a unified ID across their marketing technology stack. And we have ID consortiums that almost spring up and then are pulled back over time. And so clearly it's something that is a very hot topic within the industry at the moment. Where do you see ID5 fitting in terms of all of those different players across the ecosystem that are also concentrating and building propositions around ID management?
Yeah, I think the notion of identity has been clearly now identified as the USP of walled gardens. Right? The reason why Google and Facebook take so much of the ad dollars going out there is because they're able to identify users at scale across devices, connect that to offline data. Right? They have this ability, and that's what makes them different from the rest of the world. Right? So focusing on this, and for us, it's been really interesting to see how many references to this topic have been made by people in podcasts and articles and white papers and everything over the past, maybe not even 24, 36 months. I think we've really seen a growth in those topics in these areas of interest for the past 6 to 12 months, really. Before that, cross-device was a topic, but that was about it. The notion of identity and the notion of shared identity across the industry, which is what we're addressing as ID5, wasn't so discussed. So our view is that if we want to build a better identity framework for the industry, it has to be an infrastructure, right? It has to be something that everyone in the industry, in the open industry, can rely on, can build on top of, right? Which means it has to be absolutely neutral. You cannot do this and also be a buyer or be a seller or be a data provider or anything else, or else it's not an infrastructure anymore, right? So we're focused on building that as an infrastructure, so total neutrality, total independence. And we also believe that scale is what will make the difference in terms of the quality of the product. So from day one, we're focused on how can we maximize scalability, how can we maximize adoption of our service, because the more clients we have, the better the service become, and the better the service become, the more we can do above and beyond simple cookie matching. So we're going after a goal that others have been going after, right? Digitrust obviously being the original concept around a shared identity solution. The consortium that you mentioned, potentially others that haven't necessarily been so visible lately, but that's so the idea is the same. I think what makes ID5 different is the way we're going at it by focusing on short-term benefits. Right? Everyone has been selling the promise that in 5 years, when we all speak the same language, the world will be a better place.
Right.
Well, you got to invest now to see the potential benefits in 5 years, which is very difficult. I mean, everyone is focused on what's happening the next quarter and technical innovation and uncertainties around M&As and things like that. So it's very, very difficult to position now for a potential future benefit. So we're focusing on short-term benefits. That's what makes us different. Focusing on short-term match rates. If tomorrow you're selling 1,000 impressions, only 50% of those impressions are matched, you're going to sell them at a reduced CPM. The unmatched one are going to sell at pennies on the dollar. If you can match 10% more, 20, 30% more, you're making money today. So that's the focus that we have, is how can we justify our proposition to the market today so that we can build up to where we want to be in 5 years, which is maybe not one universal ID, because that would be strategically very complicated to achieve, but at least a handful of shared solutions that the industry can use to make sure it's more efficient.
I like that. So instead of focusing on some kind of future states and nirvana, where the open ecosystem is unified across one ID space, you're thinking more about short-term execution, and
because that's how you build that value. We had this discussion on social media recently. In an ideal world, this infrastructure is free. It's a cooperative. Everybody kind of joins in and share this long-term, ideal of a shared identity layer.
Yeah.
Yes. In the real world, it doesn't happen. It just can't work because you've got different agendas. You've got, different, priorities. You've got it's not possible.
And I guess
unfortunately, it's not possible. So how do you go about? How do you solve this in a realistic, pragmatic approach? Focus on driving value now, today, and from then on, you can build towards something that will be better, will be more efficient, will be more scalable in the future.
No more powerful incentive than the profit incentive.
Absolutely.
100%. And we saw that a little bit in terms of the recent changes to the ID consortium with AppNexus pulling out. You mentioned earlier your positioning around neutrality and some of the other solutions that are available in the market potentially having inherent conflict of interest. Do you think that is the reality of
No, I don't think there was any evil mean behind the AppNexus involvement. I think they really did want to do it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. They just happened to have the biggest domain. It was already used as a shared ID by many people on the DMP side who would use AppNexus as a pivot ID to kind of share the information with each other because everyone was well matched to AppNexus. So I think it was just like recognizing this and building this into kind of a open, more open solution. But the problem is that the minute it's not a core focus to your business anymore, and you don't want to be this kind of leader of the free world, which they arguably were until they got acquired by AT&T, then that whole concept doesn't stand anymore. And that's where not being 100% focused on this opens you up to potential changes of strategies, and it's difficult for, especially if they are your competitors, it's difficult for other companies to rely on you as an infrastructure provider. And especially difficult if they don't have any guarantees that this is going to continue in the long run. So I think it's two things. It's really the conflicts of interest, the potential, the ability to work with a competitor, especially on something so critical as identities. And the other one is the fact that you don't control your competitor's agenda, and there's no guarantee, because it's not their core business, there's no guarantee that this infrastructure will be there to stay.
Do you think that there is a risk in general, if we take AppNexus as an example, that if you are one of the larger providers of that ID matching footprint, that you will be at some point acquired by one of the walled gardens or a business that is attempting to build its own walled environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think our value is in our neutrality. Our ability to build up relies on our neutrality. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about being for profit is that you don't need to be acquired. You don't need to raise more money. If you make money, you don't need venture capital. So it gives us an independence in being a commercial entity. It gives us that independence. We're thinking with our client of different ways to kind of make this, give them like comfort in the fact that if they work with us and something happens to the company, they're not left out in the woods. They've got, we're building like the ability to kind of pull back all of the IDs that we have and all the batch table that we've built, for instance, and kind of re-internalize that.
Yeah.
We're building the ability to say, well, I don't like the way the company has changed. The company's ownership has changed, so I want to cancel my contract without prejudice, and all of those things are kind of built into the model. But I think there are two things, right? One is that our position is inherently related to our neutrality and our independence and the ambitions of the company. And you can go back, past 18 months, everything we've said, everything we've done, there hasn't been a single hint of we might change our model, right? It's been our focus from day one, and this is not going to change. Neutral, independent is key to building this infrastructure, and that's why we stand for, and that's what we want to continue to be. Obviously, we're building safeguards, we're building protections for our clients to make sure that they can work with us without being at risk. And also, I don't believe there will be one. I don't believe ID5 will be the one, or Digitrust or any other ID will be the one. I think it will be a pool of shared identity solutions, which makes each individual one of them less critical.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So there's built-in redundancy in a way, right? So if something happens to one of the identity providers, then you can still rely on the other one, which is also good in terms of market structure. You want to keep competition, you want to keep innovation, you want to keep a dynamism in this industry, and this dynamism will come from a set of shared solutions. Going from thousands of ID domains as we have today to one would potentially be ideal, with the caveat of what I just said in terms of competition and innovation. I think the realistic approach is going to thousands to 5, 10, 15, whatever that is. But that's already a massive improvement in efficiencies, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Match rates will go up dramatically if we can rely on 5 shared or 10 shared IDs in the bit stream, in the data segments that we push. So we've got the benefits of that efficiency. We've got the benefits of building a scaled solution, or 5 or 10 scaled solution, without having the risk of each individual solution becoming too strategic, that it can potentially put the rest of the industry at risk.
Which, I've spoken about it before, so I don't want to belabor it, but that's how we tend to think about identity management within our business, having a shortlist, 5 to 10 partners that we can work with, almost in an interoperable fashion. And so if we have a specific client with a particular objective, with a given set of assets, we can tailor make the identity management approach and the partners that we work with and leverage to make sure that we're building out the best solution for that client, for that context.
In some cases, when a publisher is fully on board with Digitrust, then every bid request coming out of that publisher, and potentially a buyer working solely with that publisher, will be able to work with Digitrust as its ID, because it will have a scale for that particular publisher. A trading desk such as I don't know, maybe I don't know if there's still a trading desk, but like a Media IQ or a Trade Lab, who's invested heavily on AppNexus as their trading platform, can potentially rely only on the AppNexus ID, because then it makes sense for them. It's going to connect it to their universe. So there will be different cases, right? And then in Europe, maybe the footprint that ID5 has been building, or with certain publishers, with certain platforms, make ID5 the primary ID they want to work with, right? And I think there's no one size fits all. Probably in APAC or in other geos, there'll be complementary solutions, and I think that's what we will see. That's how we'll see the market organized. It's around, again, a handful, maybe 5, 10. Probably some of the bigger players in this market will open source their ID, and they will become one of the shared IDs that, as an industry, the rest of the world can use to connect with each other. And I think it's, again, not a one size fits all approach. Brands, agencies, publishers, they will have primary focuses, and then they will need to complement those approaches by complementary solutions on the edges.
Talk to me a little bit about your personal journey then, because this is obviously a new venture for you. You've spent the last 18 months running the business, hiring people, getting officers. It's a real change for you personally.
Yeah. I didn't think I was an entrepreneur. I never thought that. Started as in investment, actually. So investing in internet startups. We're talking early 2000, and was always the one looking at the risks the obstacles and things that could go wrong. Right?
Sure.
And when you see this, you're like, that's never going to work. But at some point, when you have an idea and you keep coming at it, and you're like, and the idea around ID5 kind of started developing maybe 4 years ago. And you keep coming back at it, and you're like, oh, well, if this existed, then we wouldn't have that problem. Or 6 months later, oh, wow, that actually, you know what, that would have been a solution to this issue that we're having. At some point, you got to do it. You've got this drive, you've got this fire burning in you, in a way. And if you've got the opportunity to do it, if you find the right partners, the right co-founder, if you got the right environment. We went around the market for the first 6 months, before officially launching, but just talking to people. What do you think? Do you think it would work? Do you think it's interesting? Is that a problem that you're faced? And the feedback was amazing. People were like, wow, yeah, it's a really great idea. We need something like that. And then over the course of the past 12 months, many meetings started by, I'm so happy you're here. We really have been waiting for you. We've been waiting for something like this to appear. And this is what gives you the drive. Everything else is just, you're getting older 7 times faster than you normally are, because it's just, it's an incredible journey. It's incredibly hard. It's incredibly challenging and frustrating at times. But the highs are very high. The lows are very low, but the highs are very high, and the highs just keep you going.
It's been interesting for me to observe from the outside, because obviously I knew you briefly when you were with Weborama.
Yeah.
And then I met you at De Mexico when you were in the
just launching
the startup stance and just launching, and then the progress that you've been making and the growth. Fast forward to this year at De Mexico, big stands. A real business. With
a team. Going to 9 people soon.
Happy customers.
Happy customers. Yeah.
It's been great to watch. So what's next for you? What's the ambition to drive growth?
Right now, it's just we're still very focused on proving the value of what we do, getting more platforms on board. It's all about execution. I mean, we live and die by the quality of the service that we provide. If we can't create uplifts, if we can't improve match rates, if we can't allow our clients to kind of cut costs on matching, we don't need to exist. So it's as simple as that. It's just let's continue this and let's continue. Let's focus on execution. I mean, for the past, I'm very happy to do the podcast with you, but for the past 6 months, I'm not going out of the office. I'm just working with clients, working with product, working with marketing, just to get that value proposition together. And then in 6 months, once we've scaled, once we have, we've launched in we've built our reach in the US. We have 10, 15 clients that are fully on board with us. We've got about 30 right now that are testing. Just growing the business. 9 people. Looking at hiring probably another couple before end of this year, early next year. It's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. That's all it is. And then we'll see. And then the first 2 years are difficult because there's a lot of uncertainties. I think I don't have any experience of building a business, but what I hear from people who have is that we're doing well. We're in good shape. We've hit revenue. We've hit growth. We've hit certain milestones that are important in the early days of the life of a startup. I don't think we've arrived at all. I think we have many more months of hard work and convincing and building up with our clients. The long-term goal is still the same, is infrastructure. We believe that adtech and publishers deserve a better identity infrastructure. So that's the focus. That's the long-term focus. In the short term, it's make it happen.
I appreciate you coming onto the podcast, by the way. I just wanted to say that. So, I mean, in that same vein, do you think that there is still a lot of education? Do you think that there is still a lot of work to be done in informing people around the ecosystem, around match rates and erosion of data? I saw that you put out a social media post, a video that was very succinct in explaining the challenges.
Yeah, and you know what? We had 8,000 views of that video. It's a video about cookie matching, right? I didn't expect more than a couple hundred people being interested in that topic. Turns out it's the kind of thing that it's a problem, right? Everybody knows, oh yeah, cookie matching, match rates are a problem. This is an issue. More and more people understand that this is a strategic issue because it's really slowing everyone down and having a strong impact on publishers' revenue and the ability of the ecosystem to thrive and innovate. But very few people understand why it's an issue. How does it work exactly? Why is it a problem? And how can we fix it?
Why do you think that
is? I think that's the education piece that we need to go for, right? Because when they understand, it's like obvious. Why wouldn't you want a better match rate? There's no reason, right? Why wouldn't you try to improve the quality of your connections with your partners? And the way to do it is not necessarily that complicated, but it's just going to lifting those barriers one by one and saying, look, this is how it works. This is why you're having problems. This is why your PMP is not delivering. This is why you can't retarget your users. This is why your average CPM is not as good as it could be.
Yeah,
getting those elements right in front of publishers, in front of adtech vendors, and getting that understanding is the best sales pitch we can have.
I was going to ask, why do you think it is that people aren't necessarily paying as much attention to?
It's plumbing. Do you know about everything about the joints and the tubes and the pipes in your bathroom? No, you don't. You don't care. It should work. The minute you should care is when it starts leaking, because then you don't have water anymore, and that's a problem, right? And everybody knows the pipes are leaking in programmatic. No one really knows why. It's kind of taken for 70% match rate. Yeah, that's what we get. It's not too bad, right? Could be worse. That's what we get. 30% of the value is lost. If you sell 70% of your data segment, you're losing 30% of your potential revenue. If you only match 70% of your impressions, 30% of your impressions are sold at subpar CPMs. That's a lot of money you leave on the table. That's a lot of water leaking from your pipes. But it's pipes. It's not glamorous. It's not funky. It's not something that you're like, oh wow, let's look at the pipes today. So I think there's a bit of that. There's a bit of that it's something that it should work. Okay, it's not working really great, but it should, and it's not something that most people in the industry look at. Yes, product people, tech people who are in charge of infrastructure, they know about it, but yeah, they're not that exposed, and it's difficult for us to have access to them. And then their case to the rest of the company needs to be supported by arguments, needs to be supported by solution, and sometimes they feel very lonely in this fight, because again, it's not something that is commonly understood as cross-device is a much easier pitch, right? Everybody understands that you have a computer and a phone, and you've got different IDs on those two things, and if you connect them, then you're better off addressing audiences. It's much easier, much more tangible, right? Cookie matching is.
So you think it's, at least in part, down to almost willful ignorance, a lack of willingness to engage with the debate around piping? If I were to take a more cynical view, do you think that there is potentially an argument that there is a lot of investment and there is a lot of dollars being spent on the ad technology ecosystem, and so if you are part of that environment and you are pitching in your solution, whether that's a DMP or a TMS or a CDP or a DSP or an ad server, it doesn't benefit you necessarily to speak about that inherent flaw within the ecosystem. No data management platform provider is coming into a new business pitch and saying, well, actually, all of this great capability, ultimately you're only going to activate on maybe 30% of it because such is the ecosystem within which we operate.
Yeah, there's a bit of there's an element dirty little secret to it, right? It's like you don't want to air your dirty laundry in public, and it's gonna be the dirty adtech laundry, right? It's like we all know it's not perfect, but if no one else outside of our industry knows, then we're good. I think this is changing. I think publishers are certainly trying to make sure they know, but I think publishers and brands and agencies are getting more savvy about this. Mm-hmm. And it's not that anyone's doing it bad. It's just that the way it's been designed. I mean, programmatic 2006 or whatever, whenever it started, was a handful of vendors, right? It was a sell-side vendor and a buy-side vendor, and they just had two cookie domains to match with each other. So cookie matching, as it was designed originally, worked fine. And there was 5 platforms. Mm-hmm. Now you look at the Lumascape. There's thousands of people who have to match with, another thousands of people. So it just doesn't work anymore. It's not that anyone is doing it badly. It's just that the system doesn't scale. So we need a change of system. We need a change of framework altogether.
I also think that old system lends itself to a lack of accountability. It's like, this is an issue with the system. This is an issue with the existing infrastructure. It's in my best interest to try and solve that for myself to a certain extent, but it's almost, it's almost public or socialized to the extent that there's a lack of individual incentive to solve that particular issue.
Yeah, and it's an interface, right? It's a connection between 2 platforms. So whose fault is it? Now, it's always difficult to solve interfaces issue. Not one platform can solve it for everybody else. It's gonna be a group effort in a way, right? And so that makes it more difficult. It's an issue that everybody has. Yes, it's not something you wanna put forward. It shouldn't be. I mean, there's no reason for match rates to be a competitive advantage, really. Everybody would be better off if we're solving this problem, right? Even if you are the best of the bad ones, of the ones who can't match more than 60%, it's not great for anyone, right? And yeah, I think it's been accepted as an issue for the industry. Yeah, but I think the cost of this this acceptance is the growth of the walled gardens, because we're not efficient enough because of that. So I think we have to fight against this acceptance. We have to fight against this status quo, right? It's like, yeah, that's the way it is. No, it's not the way it is. No, we should be. We should do better. There are ways to do better. Yeah, but it's education, really, and it's proof of concept. It's proof of value. Mm-hmm. Recently working with a Dutch DSP called Platform 161, they've been able to increase their bid rate, their ability to bid on impressions coming from Appnexus by 65%, thanks to the match table that we provide. Working with Perch, a sell-side platform, mm-hmm. They've seen a 5% uplift in sales, in revenue, bottom line, just because CPMs are higher when they tap into a better match table. So that's the value that we create. In the short term, today, in a month, you plug in today, in a month, that's what you will see. And focusing on this kind of helps people realize the problems of the current system and help them justify moving to something better in the future.
Do you have many people currently working with you in the way in which we're working with you, in the sense that we want to be accessing that match table as a raw data file, as an asset that we can use to pivot and to translate identity?
Not yet. I think you've been quite pioneer on this. I think there's definitely interest, especially with all the difficulties from an agency standpoint that you have to work on attribution across siloed sources of information, or around having kind of a unique connectivity layer between different platforms. you can do double tracking, triple tracking, quadruple tracking, but then it becomes impossible to manage, and it becomes there's so many discrepancies that you just don't know where to look for anymore. So having this, I think, is a good idea in the long run. I think we're still building up, and so at this stage, apart from in certain cases, in certain markets, certain countries, certain setups between platforms, we might not be yet at the stage where we can be a kind of a turnkey solution for any agencies anywhere. But yes, there's definitely value. The ability to connect different sources of information with each other is what we're building through this kind of centralized mapping capabilities, right? Right now, the initial focus has been, let's make programmatic more efficient, let's make data distribution more efficient. But this asset has potentially many other applications around fraud, for instance, the ability to detect bot traffic and to kind of filter them out automatically off the ecosystem, around privacy compliance. We've made a very big effort to make sure that cookie matching is GDPR compliant, which it is not right now. Like, you go anywhere, you will not have a single list of vendors, maybe with one exception, a single list of vendors that are being cookie matched on the website that is being transparently disclosed to the publisher, to the users by the publisher, and where the user has the ability to say, no, I'm not happy for vendor X and Z to kind of match, collect information, match cookies. So there's a lot of applications through this infrastructure. Right now, I'm focusing on what's bringing value today, which is more revenue for sellers and better buying capability for buyers. But yeah, there's plenty of other ways to leverage this asset in the future, I'm sure.
Where do you see the cookie ecosystem evolving to? Because ever since I started in the industry, it's been the death of the cookie.
It's like the year of the mobile.
Yeah. And every single year, we're still working with cookies, we're still looking at matching, we're still looking at the same issues.
Listen, I wouldn't bet a lot of money on cookies being still the default mechanism to identify users in 20 years. But in the next 5 years, I'll put a few bucks on this. Just because there's nothing better. Like, there's nothing that is easier for users to control, right? That is kind of built into the way the system works. Cookie IDs are passed with every HTTP request. That's just the way the internet protocol has been designed. So that makes it incredibly easy to access. So there's plenty of advantages to cookies. There's also plenty of disadvantages, and probably the bad press that they've had has kind of led a lot of people to kind of fight against cookies. Cookies are not evil at all. There's no reason to be against cookies. They are, but anyway, they have limitations, and we need to find a better way to work with user data to identify users, whether it's other local storage mechanisms or whether it's other ways of having an ID passed into the ecosystem. What I'm sure is that we're not going to invent the future identity or the future ID that will replace the cookie just like that. It's going to be an evolutionary process that will have to work with the rest of the industry to get to, right? So by building ID5 as a cookie matching infrastructure, we know we address only 50, 60, 70% or whatever that is of the traffic, of the activity that's out there, and that leaves a lot of untouched areas around apps, around non-cookie friendly environments such as Safari and Firefox and things like that. But it's a first step, and it's a way to kind of get this discussion going, and it's a way to build something that can then evolve into a new identification method, whatever that is, right? We know that third-party cookies have more challenges than first-party cookies, so we're looking at evolving this infrastructure to a first-party infrastructure. We know that there's other local storage capabilities on computers and browsers. We know that potentially browsers will have a role in this redefinition of identities. But there's so many moving parts that, again, focus on what we can do with you today in the next 3, 6, 12 months. and then we'll have the discussion once we have this relationship, once we have this footprint. Once we're in a position to have a discussion, today you can design something that's great, that works great in theory, but we don't live in theory, so it doesn't make any sense.
And seeing as you bring up the issue on browsers, how do you look at these stance that Apple is taking with Safari? They seem to be fairly aggressive around the way in which they're treating cookies and third-party tracking more specifically.
Yeah. Oddly enough, they don't have the same aggressive stance for advertising IDs on in-apps. Funny, huh? No, because if you're really doing this for the sake of users' privacy, you just kill all user identifiers. They haven't, oddly enough. Oddly enough. I don't know. I mean, I think these are like the considerations that are way above my pay grade, and we're in this stratosphere of long-term strategies between Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple. I think it's not a great situation to have a handful of browsers controlling the way billions of users access online content, because the power that they have when they decide to change, one settings and say, well, actually by default, third-party cookies are going to be refused instead of being authorized, or the other way around, or there are much bigger stakes at play, I think. I don't believe Safari in particular, Apple in particular, are doing it for the sake of users' privacy. I believe they have an agenda.
I guess that goes back to your original point. There are these things that are happening at a macro level. You're focused on execution, day by day, week by week, quarter by quarter.
Yeah, again, I'd like to have a crystal ball and look into what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. What I care about is helping publishers monetize data and inventory better today, in this quarter, because it's now that they have to fight to keep their positions and they have to pay journalists, right? We know in this day and age that journalism is a very, very important counterpower in democracy. We see that every day, and it's important that media in general, newspapers, media groups, can fund independent journalism. And one of the best business models to fund this is advertising. So, fighting in their corner and kind of helping them monetize better, improve revenue, and improve the way they do business today is something that we're focusing on, because that's what's going to help us build a relationship with them and infrastructure with them that will make sense in the future.
It's a fairly unique position for you to be in, where you're able to honestly say that we are helping publishers and helping the supply side without harming anybody else in the ecosystem, i.e. the buy side, because obviously,
everybody benefits from better metrics, right? If your pipes are not leaking, you just get a smaller water bill and better water down the drain. So it's where I agree. It's a very good feeling to be in this position of just saying we're improving. I'm not going to say we're improving the world, but we're improving the industry. We're improving for everyone. It's a win-win-win-win situation, right? No one benefits from lower match rates for adtech, maybe apart from Google and Facebook, who are kind of coming out better on the other side because of our inefficiencies and our inability to execute efficiently. But the rest of the world, you can't be against better match rates. You can't be against better identity capability.
Have you got any events coming up in the near future? Anything that you want to?
Yes, so we are going to a few things. We'll be at DIG Publishing in Lisbon next week. Then I will present at Performance Marketing Conference in Moscow in 2 weeks. probably be at ATS Berlin in November. So there's a number of events. We're trying to be there, be out there, and just talk about what we do and educate people around the importance of identity, the strategic importance of identity for adtech. But again, focusing on execution. We're trying to make this happen. We're trying to prove the value that we bring. Very happy that the team is coming together. We have a number of recruitments that have been confirmed. So people are joining the team in sales, marketing, accounts role. So it's just building up, and that's the focus.
Well, thank you very much for coming in, Mathieu. I appreciate you taking the time.
No worries. Thank you, Miles.